Hello guys, this is Donald's Movies, and welcome to another World of Warcraft class role-playing guide. Now in this video, I will be talking about the Mage class and how it pretty much works and how it is perceived through all the different races and what you can do with it. And hopefully with all of that information by the end of the video, you should have a clear view of the class and you should be able to develop your own mage character. So without further ado, let's just get into it. Mages are a very complex class, and there is a lot of Warcraft science, if you can actually call it science, next to them. And if I was to go into all of that detail, this video would be very long. But luckily I already made a lore video on the arcane magic and all of the different schools that you have that come with the arcane magic, and kinda how the magic works in practice and what you can do with it. Which is why I will only kinda brush upon it in this video, but I won't really talk about it in detail. But obviously, I mean, this video stands on its own, it's like an actual guide. But if you really want to understand the mages, you should check out the lore video, which is only about 8 minutes long, and it has all the information that would take you like a few hours to gather yourself. But with all that aside and all that self-promotion aside, we need to talk about a few key things about the mages in this video, and that is, what is the magic that they're practicing, where does it come from, and who are the mages. The mages that originate from the world of Azeroth can all be traced down to the Well of Eternity, but that does not mean that the magic they use, called the arcane magic, originates from Azeroth and that mages can only be from Azeroth. An example would be the Draenei, who use the powers of the arcane and have used the powers of the arcane for thousands of years, most likely like 30,000-40,000 years ago. And they were just the Eredar, and they were very efficient when it comes to arcane magic. So it is not certain where exactly this power comes from, but we do know that it is all over the universe and that there is arcane magic on different planets. But right now, let's just focus on the world of Azeroth and mainly on the races that are on the world of Azeroth, because the Titans came to this world and they built the Well of Eternity, and it was like potent with arcane power. And at one point, the Dark Trolls, which were most likely native to the world, came to the well, and because of the energies of the well, they started evolving, and at one point they turned into the Night Elves, and they kinda became a bit smarter, and they kinda straightened their backs out, and they started calling themselves the Kaldrai, or as we know them, the Night Elves. But it wasn't all fine and dandy, like they evolved and now they're like the leaders of the world, because a group of them called the Highborn, with Ashara as their leader, started getting a bit too greedy and started getting addicted to the magic and just abusing the powers of the arcane. Now of course the Burning Legion was traveling around the universe, because they're always on the search for powers they can take from a world and worlds they can destroy, and the use of the arcane by the Highborn was like a beacon of light in the dark that drew them closer, and thus they invaded the world of Azeroth. This event was crucial in Azeroth's history because it led to the destruction of the Well of Eternity and the destruction of the entire Kalimdor landmass. But that was not the end of the Well of Eternity, because Illidan Stormrage took a few vials from it and poured it deep in Night Elven territory, for which he was imprisoned later on. After that, the Night Elves despised the use of arcane, and they started focusing on druidism and keeping the balance of the nature, and they outlawed all of the use because they know what happened to the world and their civilization with the use of the arcane. However, a group of Highborn didn't really want to just quit using it, and they called the druids cowards for quitting on the arcane. Their leader, Dathramar Sunstrider, together with the Highborn, unleashed an arcane storm over Ashenvale, and that was like the final drop for the Night Elves. Of course, they weren't mass executed, even though they were threatened that they will be mass executed by the Night Elves, but instead they were exiled from their Night Elven brethren, and they sailed to the Tirisfal Glades, later on settling in Quel'Thalas, unaware that that is once the ancient land of the Trolls. Now there they built their own mini Well of Eternity called the Sunwell by using one vial from the once big and mighty Well of Eternity. Together with the Sunwell, they also lost their skin color and they got more of like a human look, also losing some of the height as well, thus becoming the High Elves as we know of them today. However, once they built the Sunwell, it wasn't really happily ever after, because they were constantly in war with the Yamani trolls, and at one point it got critical that they needed the help from the humans who lived south of them, and the humans did help them, and in return the High Elves taught a group of humans the ways of the mage. And that is how the powers of the arcane spread from the Night Elves to almost all of the Alliance races and later on the Horde races. Soon the mage city of Dalaran was built, and the High Elves and the humans were a central part of the arcane society that had many different scholars and intelligent people from their own representative race, so the knowledge of the mage was mainly centralized on the city of Dalaran, even though you can find a few mages scattered here and there. Now for the main part of the video, I'll do a quick rundown of all of the races and how they see mages and how they became mages, but I won't go too much into detail as I already covered the most important races in greater detail. Now the central race here are the Night Elves because they're kinda the source of all the arcane magic that we have from the playable races today, and as I said earlier, they outlawed the practices of the arcane thousands of years ago, which is why they also banished the High Elves, but recently with the events of the Cataclysm, they needed all of the help they can get, and with the introduction of the Highborn into the ranks of the Night Elves, they became mages again. But even though they have mages, it still isn't a big part of their culture because druidism and worshipping a loon is still kinda the central piece of their culture, and the mages are kinda there, but they're not really that important. Now the second race to them are the High Elves, or the currently ones we have playable, the Blood Elves. And the Blood Elves are pretty much just the surviving High Elves, and they are the original Highborn that were banished from the Night Elven society, and they later on spread the knowledge of the arcane to the other races. And with that, we have the humans. Now, they were taught by the High Elves as a part of a war deal, as I said earlier, and later on they became quite prominent when it comes to the powers of the arcane, and even though the humans are quite a short-lived race compared to the other races, they can become quite good at being a mage, and it is even said that some of the humans are naturally talented or gifted for casting such magics, even though it isn't really in their race roots because the humans are originally a Titanic race. Now another addition to the humans are the Worgen or the Gilneans, because they were once just a human kingdom and they also had their own mages, so it kinda carried later on, but this story is pretty much the same as with the humans. After that, next two races are the dwarves and the gnomes, and it is said that they were taught the ways of the arcane by the humans through their alliance that they had, and even though you could only make a playable dwarf mage after Cataclysm, in the lore the dwarves could be mages for quite some time now, and it was even planned for the dwarves to be mages in the alpha World of Warcraft, but they quit on it for some reason, but lore-wise they have been mages for at least 30 or 40 years. And the last from the Alliance races are the Draenei, and they are a completely different story from the Night Elves, as they were once the Eredar who were quite known around the universe for their arcane proficiency, and while they were traveling on their ship of Oshigun around the worlds, they improved their knowledge of the arcane, so I would say the Draenei can be great mages, since it's really not certain, but a lot of people think that the Draenei are immortal, meaning that some of the current Draenei are more than 20-30,000 years old, and they had all that time to learn the powers of the arcane and just master their work, while the humans can only live for like 80-90 years, and obviously someone who has like 20,000 or 30,000 years to master something, they're definitely going to be better than someone who only has like 70 or 80 years. Now, on the Horde races, the most important ones are the Forsaken. They're like the central race, and there really isn't anything to their story apart from them once being the humans or elves, and they could use the powers of the arcane, so now after they died and in their undeath, they can use the same powers they could have used before, so there really isn't any addition to them, even though some of them kinda experimented with the powers of the arcane and did some necromancy or whatever. Next to the Forsaken, you have the Trolls, and it is really uncertain on how they learned the powers of the arcane, because the arcane was kinda centralized on Dalaran, although it is said that some of the Wanderers were left once Dalaran was destroyed and the entire Eastern Kingdom, or at least half of the Eastern Kingdom, was destroyed, so they were all these Wanderers, and they somehow taught the Trolls. Also later on, I mean, the Forsaken allied with the Horde and also the Blood Elves, so they could have learned from them as well. It is also worth saying that the orcs and the goblins fall in this category because it's not really in their roots, especially for the orcs, because the orcs are like a tribal shamanistic society. They don't really care for the things such as the arcane. and they just kinda caught onto the entire thing. And in the current time in the Warcraft universe, being a specific class isn't really that specific anymore as it was before, because the Horde and the Alliance are just a union of multiple races, and they teach each other their own skills. So the Orcs and the Goblins caught onto that, and they also taught the other races the things they knew the best. So as I said, like, they're a union and they can like teach each other different skills. And the last race I'm going to mention are the Pandaren, and they were introduced obviously in Mist of Pandaria. And mages are very rare among their alliance because they were once allied with the Night Elves, but they left since they saw what they were doing with the powers of the Arcane, and they knew something bad was going to happen, which it did. They drew the Burning Legion. So mages were shunned in the Pandaren society, but it does not mean that some of them didn't really caught onto the magics and kinda still kept the knowledge, which is why we still have them today. But as I said, it really isn't a central part of their society, and it does kinda go against their traditional values. Alright, and this is all I have for this guide. Now, before you say something in the comments like, why didn't I talk about the various arcane schools and also how you can roleplay like a Frost or a Fire Mage, just go watch my arcane lore video, as I explained most of that information in that video regarding the science of the arcane, if you can call it that. And that video and this video were meant to be like a two-part series, even though they can also be independent, but if you watch two parts, you should kinda have a better understanding. Also, if you like the video, don't forget to like and subscribe, as it really helps out the channel and keeps all the videos going. And thanks a lot for taking time out of your day to watch this video, and see you next time.